Great. Okay, well, you guys, we are so excited. Thank you for coming. Once we realized how there was so much trick-or-treating and stuff going on, I was really worried that nobody would come. So we're just grateful for your guys' participation and supporting us in this event. Okay, so to start off, I was just going to give a few thoughts. And the first thing I thought of was to maybe do, is it called an acronym? Is that what this thing is called?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to take the first letter, we're going to make, well, not we, I did it. But we're going to make, the words that go with each letter, okay? So the first one is P. And I thought of present over perfect. I read a book called Present Over Perfect, and it's by Shauna Niequist, I think. And it has really helped me to take advantage of, over the moments that in my head was supposed to end up like this, but in reality it ends up like this. And it doesn't always mesh. And it never made me happy, and I just was really frustrated that my grand idea never came out the way I wanted it to be. And I would end up feeling frustrated and angry. But after listening to this book, I recognized that perfection isn't the goal, and being present means what's happening now and enjoying that moment, which is sometimes difficult to do. But when we do it, magical things happen, because that's when we connect with our children. In that, a few weeks ago, my 5-year-old was trying to pour a bowl of cereal, and you can imagine how that would go, but it all went everywhere. And just the terror in his face, he looks at me like, she's gonna freak out. And I look over at him and I could feel it, you can feel that anger. And then all of a sudden, it's just funny. It just turned to be funny, and we just got to laugh, and it was just okay. Where that situation could have ended in tears, and it could have been a very hard thing, it ended up being a funny thing that now we can look back and it was, well, hopefully nobody remembers it because we shouldn't repeat it, right? But at least he doesn't have it, triggered on that moment, and we were able to look at the joy through that mess up. Okay, so the next thing is A, and the A, this has been a big change for me in my life. The A is for activities. When I got engaged to be married, I went to the Institute, and they gave a lesson on, they had a marriage class. And the one lesson I can remember, which actually was taught by Brother Irwin, if anybody remembers him. But anyway, the one lesson I remember, he talked about strengthening your family. And there was 3 ways that he talked about how to strengthen your family. And the first way was playing games with them. And playing games, teaches them how to win or how to lose, taking turns, following rules, and also gives you guys a chance just to laugh and have fun. But these are only short moments, right? They last maybe, on little games, it's like 10 minutes, and longer games, half hour and sometimes an hour, if you have older kids. So those things are important. The second thing were quick trips. That can be like a 24-hour trip, or it could be more like going to grandma's house for the day, or going to Lagoon for the day. But having these moments where we are together as a family and we're just having fun, that is a really great experience, especially for your children. The third thing are the long trips, and being able to step away from what you're used to for a longer period of time. Because when you're home, you can go to your room, you can go to just where you want, where you're used to going, whether that's outside to play with friends, or to the kitchen to find treats, or just wherever you're used to going. I'll tell you, there's 2 things that have changed our family. And the first thing was with Christmas. I am a stressor over keeping my house clean. I like keeping it clean, and I don't want my kids' rooms messy, and I'm kind of a meanie. So when Christmas happens, it wasn't a relaxing week off. It was me trying to keep it's just me trying to keep trying to keep myself sane. That's what it was. But I read an article about a family that went away every Christmas. And so I incorporated that with our family. And every Christmas, we go somewhere. So the first year, we went to St. George. And we got a hotel, and we stayed there for 3 or 4 days, and we had Christmas there. And then the next year was Las Vegas. The next year was Boise. And 1 year it was COVID year, we did stay home, which was really lame, but it's okay. And then last year we actually stayed in Salt Lake and just did more things closer to home. And this year we're going to Moab because it's 4th grade year. They get to go to the national parks for free, so we're gonna go. And these things have really been so great for my kids because now they have a memory to go every Christmas. It's an experience and not all these gifts, because we don't buy gifts then. We do one from Santa and one for the stocking, and that's really about it. And it's just, my kids look forward to it so much, and it's just such a great bonding moment that I am just so grateful we take advantage of. And then the second thing that happened, and this happened about 4 years ago as well, me and my kids, like, again, I am just, you have to practice the piano, you have to go clean your room, I'm really probably not fun to live with, but I could tell that things were not going well with me and my kids. And so I just remember one night praying and just asking, like, what can I do to find out, like, what can I do to make this relationship better? And I remember clear as day the impression, you need to go on a mommy and me trip. And so every year in August, the first week of August, because Nick is an accountant, and the first week of the month is always busy for him. So I take the kids and we go somewhere and we get a hotel and we stay there and we just, like, I don't have to clean the bathroom when I'm at a hotel and I don't have to pick up people's clothes because it's just all in a suitcase, right? So for me, it works so much for me to remove my children from home and go somewhere so that we can have a moment of just fun and they don't see me as this tyrannical, that's the word, right? Tyrannical, okay. You know what I mean. This person is always telling them all these things that they have to do and keep done. So, and I just really have been so grateful for that opportunity to take my kids away. And it's just me and it's just them and we just have fun. And it has really strengthened our relationships. And not only that, but now my kids love audiobooks. And I am so grateful for that because any road trip we go on, we listen to an audiobook and we have gone through some really great books. So when I was preparing for this little message that's longer than, I sent around some surveys to the 5th graders and 2nd graders, and I had them fill out some questionnaires. And one of the questions I asked was, what are some of your family's favorite games? And I just wanted to share just a few that came back to me. One said Jackbox, Clue, and Risk, which we only play for an hour because 8 hours is too long. One said their favorite game is Work. One said, our favorite game is Clue. Well, only me, really. One said, our favorite game is spending time with family. And the last game that I thought was funny was, Don't Wake Up, Dad. I'm sure that should have come from my kids. Okay, the rest of them are a lot quicker. R is for relationships. What are the qualities of a good relationship? And really, when you think of a good relationship, you know that your best relationships are with your friends. And when we think of a relationship, and it's starting with a good friendship, can those traits go both ways? So here are some qualities of a good friend. Good listeners, happy and like to laugh together. They're helpful, they're honest, kind, they like doing things together, and they're forgiving, and they'll say sorry. Again, I asked the kids what made a good friend, and this is some of the answers that they said. A good friend means having a good game of tag. A good friend is like a dog because they'll sit with you. One person said, say, boy, you want to be my friend? And the last one was someone who can forgive and understand you. Which I think is really important that we see our children, are they seeing us as a friend? Like, we still have to be parents and we still have rules and ways that we have to make sure that they're becoming good people like when they leave the home. But are we being a friend as well? Do they see us as a friend? And really, a lot of those, some of them even would put my mom or my parents, my family, like it was really quite touching. And really, we do need to be our kids' best friend. Although we do have to enforce rules, we should also be all of the above, all of the traits above, which will make following the rules easier because they know that those rules are coming from love and not just wanting to make them do what we want, which is what I usually do. Here are some of my favorite rules that they responded with as well. I have to pick tomatoes. Your curfew, these are the rules of their houses. Your curfew in high school is midnight, and don't lie. Don't light the house on fire. No boyfriends before high school, no drugs, and no sneaking out. Do not get on my bed. And I wonder what that was. That's probably the parents saying, do not get on my bed. And then the last one was, no screaming while my little brother is sleeping. So I think those are really fun to hear. The next one, E, is excel. Let yourself excel in what you love. I feel like often when we become parents, we do end up giving up some things that we really do love because our priorities shift and our time shifts. But the things you love can be incorporated with our family. For example, if you like cooking, teach your kids how to provide a gourmet, or teach your kids how to cook or provide a gourmet meal, or maybe research meals from other countries. If you're good with money, teach your kids to budget, take them to the grocery store, let them have $10 and see what they buy for dinner. Play Monopoly with them. Gardening, let your kids plant, create an herb garden, get the butterflies and watch them hatch. Hiking, get your kids outdoors, find places on the map and research with them. Get into geocaching. I did that for a little while with my kids and they loved it. It was interesting because on that questionnaire I also asked the kids, what do you think your parents excel in? And these are some of those responses. My mom is good at soccer, and my dad is good at sleeping. One brilliant child wrote, my mom is good at the PTA. My mom and dad are good at reading. My parents are good at napping. My parents are good at everything. My parents are good at working, keeping my family safe, and loving me and my siblings. I think our children really do know how hard we work and how much we put into keeping them safe and loved. The N is for new interests. With each child comes new interests. They will like new and different things. Finding those things and doing it with them means a lot to them. Just this past week, did anybody do any of the challenges? Because I didn't see anybody tag us. It was only me. I didn't. But I did love them. It was surprising to me. Every night I put my kids to bed and I spent a half hour with them, which is the next letter. But anyway, this time I just said, let's play a game. And I let them pick whichever game they wanted. And just the joy that came over their faces of me spending that moment and just playing a game, just them. And afterwards, can we do this every night? No, but we'll do it more often. So then the last one is time, T for time. At the beginning of the school year, I had a hard experience. Sally came up to me crying and asked why I had to be in the PTA and why I wasn't home very much. Because I was so busy, right? Like, it was a hard first year. And I'm not justifying. I'm just saying. And she just was crying, and I just told her. She even cried more, and I said I committed for 2 years, and she really wanted to go. But I think things have calmed down. I am home a lot more, but after that moment, I was like, I've got to be able to spend more time like making sure that they know that they are my priority and not PTA. And so it's just been so fun giving them more attention. I do spend, like, bedtime has to start at like 7:30 so I can have that half hour with each of them. We usually just read and we just talk, and it's amazing to see that what they bring up and what they end up talking about, because it's what they just see as important. And usually it's a lot of nonsense, but it's important to them, right? But I will say that's not possible for everyone. I have one sister who has 9 children, so bedtime would have to start at like 4 for her to be able to do that. So I will say that thinking about your own family, it's just finding those ways, and maybe it's one different one every night, or just however you can manage it. Kids, this is like their time that they want to be with you, and soon they won't, right? Actually, I don't know. My kids aren't to that point yet. But I just really am so grateful for this chance we had to come together, and even that I had to put some thoughts together to make me see, to reflect back on the things that I feel like I am doing right and the things that I can see where I can improve. Here are the last quotes I wanted to share. How do your parents show that they love you? They said hugs and kisses. So many of them said hugs and kisses. It was awesome. Another one said, they tuck me in my bed and keep me safe. Another one said, chocolate bars. They give me a home and a warm bed by doing hard work and getting a lot of eggs from the chicken. And by talking and hanging out with me. So just to end, I just like to say how grateful I am again that you've come and shared your evening with us. It wasn't the best night. I know it's Halloween and a lot of kids have been doing trick-or-treating. So hopefully you'll find this worthwhile of your time. And then for those that watch it later, hopefully you'll enjoy what's being shared. I am so grateful for Mr. Park, the poor guy. Like, I call him all the time, well, like at least every year to ask for help for things, and he's just so good to humor me, and I loved his class. I still remember the habit assignment where we had to go home and like work on a habit and write it down, and I know mine was exercising, and I'm still trying to work on that. So I know that the tools that he gives are always beneficial, and I just am so grateful for him. So we'd like to turn the time over to him and just thank him for his time.
Thanks, Stephanie. She's really glad you came, because otherwise she would just have to sit there and listen to me. Because I was giving this no matter what. Stephanie, what do you mean by tagging? Are you playing tag?
Oh, yes. Do you want to play next time? You could win.
As my youngest daughter says, why do you have to be so old? In groove voice. No, it's such a pleasure for me to be here and even see some of my former students, and I'll try not to bore you as much as I did in school. But I definitely feel blessed to talk today on my very favorite topic. I tried to throw some of this stuff in when I was a health teacher. I tried to throw some of it in as I was a basketball coach for 26 years. I just really believe in family and a strong family. And I appreciate Stephanie putting up one of my favorite quotes, because I truly believe that our society will never get fixed until our families are solid. And no amount of success that we can have, money, fame, anything will take the place of success in the home. And I truly believe that. And but please don't think I think I'm the perfect parent. Far from it. Thank goodness I had a wife that raised my kids basically while I was gone all the time. But I did learn a lot from 3 kids, Erica that's now 34, and Morgan that's 31, and Alyssa that's 26. I mean, that's not 26, 25, and then 26 years of coaching. Like he says, I always talked to my teams and told them we needed to be a family. And I tried to incorporate what I tried to do at home with my family. I tried to incorporate what I did with my basketball team back home with my family. So hopefully I can give you at least 1 or 2 tidbits that will help you to continue to be great parents, or if you're just starting maybe and worried about today's society and raising a family in today's society. Because I will tell you, I have 7 grandchildren, and I get scared a lot for my grandkids. And that's one reason I retired after 34 years, because I want to spend more time with my grandkids and hopefully help my children out a little bit that way. But there's an old saying that says an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so hopefully a couple of things I can give you will help you to help your child and prevent them from testing, using alcohol, drugs, and be able to communicate with you and have those hard talks, those tough talks that kids don't want to have with parents sometimes. I know the first year I started teaching health, there were some tough topics that I had a hard time talking with my own kids, let alone 34 students, but it got a lot easier as I practiced. So, and I would dare bet everybody in this room has made lots of plans. You made plans for what you wanted to do when you grew up, how many children you wanted to have, where you wanted to live. Some of those plans came to fruition, some didn't. But how many of us have planned on how we're going to raise drug-free kids? I'm going to ask you just a few questions. You answer to yourself, not to me, yes or no on each of these questions. And if you're just starting a family, you can say, will I, rather than I do, okay? I talk with my daughter or son about our family's values. Do they know your values? In all these cases, you can't assume that they know. I talk and listen to my son or daughter about drugs or alcohol. I help my daughter or son practice ways of saying no. And let me just say this. After teaching teenagers for a long time, saying no to drugs and alcohol is not hard. Saying no to your friends is incredibly hard. It's incredibly difficult. And so do you practice how to say no to your friends and not lose their friends and keep their friends? And at the end, I'm going to kind of do a little practice and show you what I would do with my young kids right now and how to practice it so that they already know what to do in those stressful situations. I have helped my son or daughter find fun, drug-free activities, doing lots of activities like Stephanie said. I have become acquainted with my children's friends. That may be more important than ever before, is to not just know who your kids' friends are, but to know that they're friends and know kind of where they come from and what their values are. If you answered no to any of these questions, you might want to reevaluate your plan for a drug-free family. I'd like to just briefly, and I know we have doctors and nurses in here, so you know this much better than me. And I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the mental aspect of drug and alcohol use on kids, but just a little of the physiological. Most of you are fairly aware, I imagine, of the prefrontal cortex and how that's the decision-making part of our brain. And that's why kids are so dumb, because it doesn't get developed until they're about 24 at least. And in my case, I'm 16, it still hasn't developed according to my life. But these synapses make connections in all the decisions that our children make. And if they're struggling with something and they turn to alcohol, let's say, to be accepted, that synapse is being connected. So anytime they feel like they want to be connected, that's the way your brain is telling them to go. If they're stressed and they have this idea that to forget about the stress or to have fun, they can't have fun without drugs and alcohol. Those synapses close. And then every time that decision comes up, it gets harder and harder to say no. And the younger that they say yes, the more those synapses are cemented in there. And it makes it that much more difficult. So it can never be too young to make sure your kids know values and know why. Not just say, no, we don't do drugs. Why? We don't use alcohol. Well, why? And it's important that they know that. What I'd like to spend the majority of today on, and go as quickly as I can, but still cover this, is 5 things I think build strong relationships on my basketball team or in my family. And it just so happens that those 5 things form a 5th, okay? I used to tell my ball team, because there was 5 on the basketball floor, right? I said, imagine you have this big sand punching bag, and it's heavy. And each of you are an individual, and you try and hit that bag with your fingers. You're not going to move that bag very far, and you're probably going to bust a finger, or at least sprain it, jam it. Okay? Now, if you have 2 of you working together, you're going to move it a little better. If you have 2 of these 5 things I'm going to talk about, you're going to be able to be a little more successful with your children and having that strong family relationship. 3, stronger. 4, you're going to get a pretty good wall up. But if you have all 5 and you know how to punch right, you can do some damage to that bag and you're not going to hurt your wrist. And so these are the 5 things, and these first 3 I think are the most critical. The last 2, it's like hitting something with 3 fingers. It's not going to be as strong as if you have those last 2. But these first 3, I honestly believe, are really critical, and Stephanie touched on a couple of these already. But I think number 1 is finding ways to develop a strong relationship with your children at a very young age and then continue on through your teenage lives. I'm going to ask you to do something for me, and I'm going to ask one or two of you to raise your hands. Okay, just think of one or maybe two of your favorite childhood memories. Who was involved with that memory? Anybody want to share who was involved? Was it a friend down the street? Who was it involved with?
My great-grandma.
Okay, your great-grandma.
Mom and Dad.
Your mom and dad. You know, I can't think of a childhood memory that surpasses any that I had with my family, whether that be who I grew up with or my children or my grandchildren. There's not one. And I've had 2 state championships, and I'm not bragging about that, and they were great. And I loved them, but they don't even compare an inkling to the memories that I have with my kids. And taking time and building those memories is so critical. I just want to read this from a study done in Harvard. Studies have shown that the time children spend in recreational activities with their family helps determine their interest and ultimately their choice of friends. If those activities are healthy, wholesome activities, the chances are greater that our children will develop friendships with wholesome, healthy friends. You know, sometimes we think, and we do, we have to teach our kids to work. Some of my best memories are also not at the time when my dad was teaching me how to dig a post hole, but I still, now, there's some good memories working with my dad. But it's okay to have fun with your kids. It's okay to do a lot of activities with your kids because it shapes what they're going to like doing, and it's going to shape the kind of friends that they're around. And we have to make time. Today's society, there is so much going on. You know how we talk about the best kids were saved for now? I think the best parents were saved for now. I couldn't be a parent today. I'm glad I'm a grandparent. Okay? There's so much coming at your children. And there's so much coming at you. And there's so much that time takes away from your family. But this is one of my favorite quotes by Stephen Covey. He said, "The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities." We have to learn what's really most important to us as a family, as me and Lisa as a husband and wife. And then we have to schedule time for those priorities. I had to learn that at a very early age. And I don't want to share a lot of stories and bore you about my life, but when I first graduated in '88 from college, 1988, my wife had been teaching for a year French here at Bear River High School. And so I was trying to look for jobs semi-close around. Somebody told me to look into West Side. I don't want to go to West in Salt Lake City. I don't know anything about those gangs. I grew up in Oakley in South Somewhere. I had 74 kids in my graduating class. And then I find out it's in Idaho, in Dayton, Idaho. And so I go and look at it. It is small. And I thought there's no chance that fresh out of college I'm going to get a head coaching job. But I tried. And I got the job. And so we moved to Lewiston, Cornish, and because it was a 45-minute drive for my wife and about a 30-minute drive for me. And I was hired to be the head boys basketball coach, assistant football coach. In Idaho, they have a junior high league, so I was the 7th and 8th grade boy basketball coach, and I ran the Little League basketball program. They had me teach physical education, which I graduated in, and they had me teach 7th grade geography and 8th grade history, which I hadn't taken since 7th and 8th grade. Okay, so for my first few years, I was studying hard just to stay ahead of 7th and 8th graders. So if they asked me questions, I didn't look like I was totally out of it. The whole fake it till you make it thing. And so I spent a lot of time. Plus, I was under the impression that if I didn't win right away with my varsity basketball team, that I'd get fired. And so this was my day. I'd leave the house. Oh, back up just a little bit. 1988 is also when my first child was born. Okay, so I leave the house every day about 6 a.m. I come home, 8, 9, 10, 11. Back then, you didn't have Huddle to just automatically exchange game film with coaches over the computer. You had to go to the game and watch it, or meet a coach with a VHS, if you don't know what that is, and drive miles to do that. So I was never home. Okay, we do this for 3 years. And then I come home one night, and my wife tells me something that my 3-year-old daughter now had said. Still breaks my heart when I think about it. And I've told this story enough that you won't see tears. But for a lot of years, there was tears, and it still pricks my heart. My wife said, Erica said, how come Dad doesn't like to stay home with us very much? From that moment on, every time I stayed late at work, all I was thinking about was getting home to my child and my wife. And about this time, I had a brand new son, too. And then when I'd come home, guess what I was thinking? We're going to lose if I don't spend more time looking through these game films. If I don't spend more time, my students are going to tell their parents I'm an idiot because I don't know the difference between a country and a state, or something like that, which is probably true. But regardless, I was sick that whole year. Every flu, every cold, I was sick. And then it finally clicked me, because I'm not the sharpest tool. It finally clicked in me, you got to decide what is most important. Once I decided I could flip hamburgers for the rest of my life, nothing against people who flip hamburgers, I'll do it. If I can't maintain my job as a basketball coach, that's fine. My kids and my wife are most important. After that, I never missed an activity. We had to do some mighty planning, and Lisa is today the president of the scheduling club. When anybody asked me, when Stephanie asked me to talk, I had to ask my wife first what's on the calendar, because she knows what's going on in my life, thank goodness. But I make sure that I schedule my priorities. And as young parents, I would say that's one of the most important things you can do, is schedule your priorities, schedule your kids first, and yeah, you have to do your job. But never at the expense of time with your children, doing fun activities, teaching them how to work, those type of things. Research shows one of the biggest problems with families today is the lack of consistency. That's key. Consistency, family dates. The books I've read talk about family dates. I love family dates, and I love one-on-one dates. One of my favorite memories is when me and my youngest daughter would go Christmas shopping for my wife. One, I didn't have to stress about it because she knew what my wife liked. And two, we got to spend time just talking and being together. And we do that, Lisa and I, with our grandkids now. I would highly recommend that you have some time set aside for date night with your kids. It'll mean the world to them. My daughter still remembers. We came up with our favorite song by Keith Urban, Love Somebody Like You. And we'll sing it to each other and point when and she's 25 now. Make time. Make that a priority. I think that's huge. Okay, number 2 in the fist is communication. You think it's hard with young kids? Wait till they get older. And by the way, when I was you people's age, I thought, if I can just make it till my kids are all out of the house, it's going to be so easy. I think it's more hard being a parent of 34-year-olds now than it ever was in teenagers or elementary kids. So all these things still apply with me. And I'm grateful I got to do this because it was a great refresher on what I needed to do. Effective communication is a skill. What does that mean? You have to constantly practice and improve. I used to tell my basketball teams, you're never going to stay right here. You're either going to improve or you're going to digress. There's no way you can stay the same. Same with communication with your children. It's something you got to work on. How am I doing? What can I do to communicate better with my children? Because it's a skill, which means you can get better at it. And research shows one of the biggest problems with communication today, not just with kids, but with adults too, is everyone is talking and no one is listening. There's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's so we can listen more. There's a quote that says, we must first seek to understand before we seek to be understood. And with your children, that couldn't be more true than that. You have to listen to your kids so that you can know their thoughts, their feelings. A lot of issues have to deal with communication, with families, with jobs, with everything. And the number one problem, I think, other than we all want to talk instead of listen, is, especially with kids, is we don't listen with respect. We think, all you're doing is thinking, okay, how am I going to tell my kid this? I'm gonna tell them this, and they better dang well listen, and it better sink in. And we don't respect and listen to them. I can't tell you at ball games as an athletic director or as a teacher, a parent-teacher conference, or just since I'm so into communication, how irritating it is to just me personally to watch someone's kids talking to them with a smile on their face and their parents like this. You know, what are we telling our kids? Or looking at the TV and not looking at, we got to look our kids in the eyes. As Stephanie says, our kids are smart. Kids are so much smarter than I was as a kid. You have to look them in the eye. You have to nod. You have to look engaged when they talk to you. And I know there's some important things on that phone. Believe me, I know. Because my wife yelled at me constantly as an athletic director to shut my dang phone off. Because every time we'd have a serious conversation, it would ding, and I would look at it. That wasn't fair to her. So I'm still learning. But with kids, they know. You got to give them some respect. You got to show them that you care what they're talking about. And then words express a lot, but it's feelings that really express. So when they're talking to you, acknowledge their feelings, especially the younger years. When they're in high school, you probably don't have to as much, but just say, man, I can tell you're really sad. I can tell you're really ticked off at me. You're really mad. And let them know that you understand those feelings. Then show understanding by responding and rephrasing what your child says, but always end it with, I'm glad you shared this with me. Let them know that you're glad that they talked to you and that they were willing to share maybe something they're not proud of, maybe something that they made a mistake on. But still let them know that you're glad that they shared it with you. My wife used to always say this. She used to always tell our kids this. I'll believe you always until you break that trust, and then it's hard to get back. Well, it's hard for them if they don't trust that you're going to listen to them. And thank goodness my wife, to this day, is a good listener. She spends 3 hours a day with my children on the phone. I don't know how she does it, literally. Okay, the third, to make it even stronger, is have a consistent strategy for dealing with conflict. Because there's going to be conflict when they become teenagers, when they're young, when they're 34. There's going to be conflict, and there has to be a strategy. And that's where communication comes in again. They have to know that they can communicate with you. And I was raised in a different time. When I was in 5th grade, I wouldn't shut up in my teacher's class. I kept talking to this girl that I thought was cute right next to me. And I literally had the Board of Education, a board with holes in it, broken over my butt. That wouldn't fly today. And I'm not saying it should. But I did learn a good lesson. And I was no way going to go home and tell my dad. And I was praying, because my teacher lived in my town, that my dad didn't find out. And my dad was raised in a different time. He was born at the end of the Depression. And his dad was incredibly hard on him. And I felt sometimes my dad was hard on me, but I never questioned this. Sometimes we have to reprove with sharpness. Sometimes we have to get after our kids. As Stephanie says, We can't always be their best friend. Sometimes we have to get after them. But we have to show an overabundance of love after. And sometimes we as parents, unless you're different than me, you might even goof up when you get mad sometimes. And you have to apologize. Show some vulnerability. When your children know that you're vulnerable, that you make mistakes, they're more likely to talk to you. It's a proven fact. I remember going to the woodshed a couple of times with my dad, but I never remember once when he didn't come down to my bedroom after and let me know how much he loved me. And sometimes sobbing, apologizing because he was too hard. I never doubted his love for me. And so I was never afraid to talk to him. I was afraid of him when I was young, but I wasn't afraid to talk to him because I knew he loved me. And I knew he had my back no matter what. Even if I got in trouble, which I deserved, I knew that he loved me. So just remember, yeah, sometimes you do have to get after him with a little sharpness. But then you got to show love in such, what is it? Just love unfeigned means it never stops. If they know you love them, they can take some criticism. Shaming never works. And when it comes to drug and alcohol, it will never work. We cannot shame them. If we try to shame them, all we do is put a wedge between them and us and destroy their self-esteem. Without self-esteem, I'm still convinced that self-esteem is a huge part of alcohol and drugs. If someone loves themselves and they're educated, I don't believe that they're going to do something that's going to damage their brain cells or hurt them or hurt others. And when we shame them, we kind of destroy that self-esteem a little bit. So it's got to come from love. And it's imperative that you describe the conflict that you see with them. Again, sometimes that conflict isn't there. It's just a lack of communication. They were saying something or you heard something that wasn't exactly right. So again, listen to them and rephrase, is this what happened? And let them know, as my wife was so good at. If you tell me the truth, you're going to get in trouble. If you don't, you're going to get in worse trouble. And you're going to lose that trust that I have for you. In anything that you do, I trust you until you lose that. Okay, those are my three top. Those are the three. They're not easy. They're something you got to do all the time. And that makes a pretty solid punch. But these last two solidify it. You have to take a family position. Again, you can't assume that your children know what your position on alcohol and drugs are. You have to let them know what your position is and what our family position. This is our family position on drugs and alcohol, or whatever the case may be. And share your views. Studies have shown when families have a clear position, kids are much more likely to avoid problems. So talk about it. Have family meetings. I remember my dad was really good at this, and I got kind of tired of him, but we always knew what we were expected to do. To help mom, to do the chores, what his stand on drugs were, what our family was most important. My dad would always say, friends will come and go, and I used this quote with my kids all the time until they got sick of it, but your family will always be there. I even told my two oldest this once when they were fighting, and I made them hold hands for an hour. And they had to apologize if they were going to hold hands for another hour. I don't know, my daughter's tried that with her two daughters and it hasn't worked so well. They start doing the left hook or something. I don't know, so maybe that didn't work so much. But it does avoid problems when they have a clear understanding of where your family stands on all those. And then the last thing is practice with your child on how to say no to their friends. Because if, I don't know, if someone comes up to me that I don't know, even as an adult, but especially as a child, and says, come on, try this marijuana. Everybody's doing it. You'll love it. And I say no, and they say, well, I hate your guts. I didn't know you before. Okay, hate my guts. But if it's somebody I really care about, that's hard to say no to those friends. It's not hard to say no to drugs and alcohol. It's hard to say no to those friends. And so I'm just going to briefly go through a way that you can say no, teach your children to say no, and either keep their friends or see that their friends really aren't their friends. Okay? And I still use this strategy today in some degree. Okay, the first thing is you have to teach your child, if they don't know the entire situation, to ask questions and not stop asking questions until they know the entire situation. If someone comes up to a friend comes up to your child and says, hey, let's go smoke marijuana. They don't really have to ask questions. What are you going to ask? How much do I have to pay you? How much are we going to smoke? Where are we going to go? You know the problem. But if they say, hey, let's meet after school back by the tennis courts, or whatever, and that's not something that's normal, or let's go to this party tonight. Then I don't know the situation. Why do we want to go to that party? Oh, it's just going to be fun. Well, what are they going to do? They're just going to have fun. Don't tell them not to stop asking questions until they say, we're just playing games. And I would even ask, is there going to be alcohol there? Is there going to be drugs there? Especially once they become teenagers. And if there's not a problem, you're done. If there's a problem, then go to step number 2. State that problem. My kids always call it Captain Obvious. That's illegal. That's against the law. That's against my family rules. That's Penal Code number 1778, if you know what it is. But be specific. That's trouble. And you do two things a child does two things by saying, hey, that's illegal. It forms in their mind what your family goals are and that's not good. Number 2, it's helping their friend out. Because how many of us have done something without thinking things through? Now I'm helping my friend by, you realize that's against the law. Okay? Then if they keep pressuring, then you go to step 3. List the consequences. This is where they find out if their friend is really a friend. I'd get in a lot of trouble with my parents. I could get kicked off the basketball team. My reputation would be marred for life. It would hurt my mom and dad. And I will tell you that kids think about that. I still remember growing up. The biggest deterrent, once I got a little older, was not the fear of getting in trouble from my dad. It was the fear of seeing sadness in my mom's eyes that I disappointed her. And I found that to be true with most kids. They don't want to disappoint you no matter how tough they look and how tough they seem. They don't want to disappoint you. Now, if their friend keeps pressuring them, even though you've told them all these consequences, then that's when you tell your child, your friend's willing to have you get kicked off the team, to maybe be in trouble with the law, to lose respect and trust from your parents. I'm not sure what kind of friend would ask you to do that. It just makes them think a little bit. Then after they list the consequences, they're still pressuring your child a little bit. Then list some alternatives. Hey, how about, and I know Stephanie loves taco time, and I say, hey, Stephanie, how about instead we go to taco time, I'll buy the macho nachos and the Mexi ice. Okay, and I know that she likes that because she's my friend. I can't say, no, Stephanie, let's instead go dig a ditch. That's probably not going to convince her. Okay, but I know something she likes, so I say, hey, let's do this. And they still say no. Then you go to step number 5. You tell your child, if none of those work, go to step number 5, which is start leaving, walking away. The longer they stay there, the more likely they are to succumb to the pressure. Now they have to start walking away. And while they're walking away, they do 2 things. They resell the alternative, and they also leave the door open for the friendship. Nope, Stephanie, I'm not going to go on, but if you want, at 8 o'clock, I'll still be at Taco Time, and I'll buy your macho nachos and your Mexi Ice if you're there. So, what does that tell my friend? It tells my friend that I'm not saying no to her as a friend. I still like her as a friend. But I'm saying no to what she's asking me to do. And then I would tell my child, if that friend never talks to you again, you learned a great lesson. They didn't really care about you. And you would have found out sooner or later, and it might be later when it's a lot more difficult situation. And I would practice that with my child, those 5 steps on how to say no to your friends. Because again, that's critical. Last thing, and then I'll be quiet. Like I said, it's hard to be a parent. I'm glad I'm a grandparent. If something's not quite right, I'll give my grandkids to my kids. You know, but give yourself some grace, too. Don't beat yourself up. Heaven knows the world does a good enough job of that, of beating you up. Saying you're not good enough as a parent, you're not good enough at this, you're not good enough at that, especially with social media. Give yourself some credit, give yourself some patience, give yourself some grace, and know that you're just going to get better. Because you wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't want to be the best parent that you can be. Have you made mistakes? Probably. Not as many as me, because I'm a lot older, so I made more mistakes. But that's how we learn. And I can't stress enough, no matter what your kids say, I remember going down to my room, I didn't say it out loud, but I remember going down to my room and saying, I hate my dad. I didn't hate my dad. Maybe your kids say that to you once, they don't hate you. I guarantee you they don't want to disappoint you, especially if you're building those strong relationships early on, doing a lot of activities together, working together, showing that it can be fun working too. And some of the activities, again, might not be something that they think at the time is necessarily fun. My dad was a big cowboy. He should have been born when everybody just used horses. And we would go once a year out to Swayze, west of Delta, to chase wild horses. Not my bag of tea. But I went. And remember when I first said, what are some of your best childhood memories? Some of my top 10 are going to Swayze chasing wild horses with my dad. And just remember that. You might not see the fruits for a little while, but you'll see the fruits as long as you stick with your process. I thank you so much again, Stephanie, for this opportunity. Good luck with